Well, it really feels like the 2012 Formula One season gets underway when cars start getting launched and seen by the public. And I'm alongside Gary Anderson, who's new to the BBC F1 team for 2012, our new technical analyst, and you're a man that comes with some rather impressive credentials for your job.
Well, yes, I mean, obviously I've been involved in Formula One for many, many years, and as technical director at Jordan, Stewart and Jaguar, it was a reasonably successful period in my career, but it's also nice to do this because it's nice to bring that technical aspect to the viewer, because so much is lost in these cars going around at the speeds they are, but it's why they go at that speed, and hopefully I can bring that to home.
Good, and you bring a bit of modesty as well. Reasonably successful. Designing race-winning Formula One cars is more than reasonable, but let's talk about how your new role is going to work, because it's always a real cat and mouse game in Formula One. We spend our lives trying to get the secrets out of the teams, trying to find out why they're doing things, and they spend most of their time either telling us porky pies or sending us on wild goose chases. So hopefully your highly trained eye will be able to work out the approach to races by teams and car developments and stuff. Are you excited?
Yes, I mean, I'm excited at that because obviously being involved with it for so long and designing parts of the cars, you don't tell me so many lies because I can pick them up on it a little bit. So that's always quite nice. You never want to put somebody on a spot because there's always a reason for everything. But again, it's looking at the developments, it's looking at the development direction, it's looking at who makes best use of tyres, when they make the best use of the tyre, all that sort of stuff. So hopefully we can bring that to the public, and that's the important avenue for me, I suppose. Great.
So behind us is the new McLaren MP4 27A. They call it the A because it's the sort of first car, the test car, the launch car, if you like. That's cost millions of pounds. However, to decipher it, we have a pen, a paper and a clipboard, and that's exactly what we're about to do for you, to try and sort of explain why McLaren have designed the car in the way they have. Let's start with just a little wander along the front, Gary, and perhaps you can start by explaining to us your first thoughts.
Well, obviously there's two major regulation changes for this year in the cars, and one is the front of the chassis. Basically the FIA put in an area where the nose can't be any higher. What they're trying to do is stop the cars flying over the top of each other like Mark Webber did in Valencia a few years ago.
Yeah.
So they've tried to instigate that by putting this box section. I'll just show what I mean here, because it's one of the sections. If you take the front wheel, basically the regulation here is that there has to be a cross-sectional area, and the two wheels are obviously sitting out here somewhere.
Yeah.
And what some teams have done is the front of the chassis comes forward, and there's a box section just here. That's where you're not allowed to put bodywork, and that's at 550 millimetres high. So basically the way McLaren have done it, the front of the chassis comes along, just touches that box, drops down into the nose. That's it. This is the gap to the ground. They've got a nice decent gap there. But what some other teams have done, they've run the sort of Red Bull type philosophy, the two ears that you see on top of the chassis. They run it forward like this, and then they've sort of dropped it down very dramatically. So it looks a bit bent on the top section. This allows the bottom of the chassis to be a bit higher in this area, so you can get more airflow through there. So in effect, those two ears are sitting up here, like that.
Yeah, and that was what Red Bull originally inspired that, didn't it?
Red Bull. The area you want to lose is this corner, so that allows them then to have the vertical height here, the chassis underneath is shaped like that. They eliminate those corners. Because in reality, this area here of airflow that goes through underneath the car and between the wheels and the chassis, that's what the rest of the car has got to work with. So basically you want to get the chassis as high as possible, because you can't make it any narrower and you can't widen the wheels because of the regulations. So you want to get it as high as possible to allow as much airflow through that area to get to the leading edge of the side pods, which then helps create the downforce.
Well, let's go towards the front then and have a proper look at the nose of this car. Because obviously McLaren's looks much more beautiful than the first car we saw, which was the Caterham. But what you just explained there, clearly the McLaren's is a little bit lower. So are they going to be able to utilise that area of development as much as Caterham?
Probably not. I mean, obviously Caterham are a youngish team coming in. They're going to have trouble exploiting everything anyway. But as far as, like, let's say Red Bull, we haven't seen their car yet. If they exploit that to the maximum, they will have more opportunity. If you did a back-to-back wind tunnel test with the rectangular box and the one with these two ears on it, on the front of that chassis, you probably couldn't measure the difference in the wind tunnel. But the only problem is that if you can get more mass flow through between the wheels, it gives more opportunity to work this area later. So you can put more aggressive barge boards or a more aggressive T-tray floor area. So it's about the vision of where you're going to try to get to. It's not about today. You can't prove it today. You might be able to prove it tomorrow or next month or a month after. And I think they might have got themselves in a little box there that there's not as good a way out as some of the other teams.
Okay, because these hands have designed Formula One cars. Would your Formula One car, if you were still designing them in 2012, have looked like that at the front?
I like nice things. So
Yeah.
there might be a chance. But
It's quite pretty, isn't it?
yeah. However, on the way there, it's obviously race performance, and that's what you've got to cater for. Adrian Newey is one of these guys that I think his biggest asset is his vision for the future. It's not today, it's about where he's trying to get to. And he's willing to commit to some of these things. Now, on the other hand, with those ears on top of the chassis, the driver's vision is compromised a bit as well. So there's a lot of things like some of the accidents Lewis had last year.
Yeah.
If the chassis was made to be, a reasonable amount lower than this, might be better vision for the driver and a few less accidents as well. So everything's a little bit of a compromise, but we'll see during the year who does the best job.
And this is the first front runner that we've seen. If the Red Bull car gets revealed in a few days' time, and Red Bull and Adrian Newey have gone down the route that we've already seen from Caterham with this kind of drop, how quickly will it be until McLaren are rolling out theirs? Because that seems to be the way it works now in Formula One.
Really and truthfully, it's a new car for them.
Yeah.
You can't. It's not something you can add on to. That's what you're looking for. You're looking for that concept in your car as a big enough step for the others not to be able to copy it and have to make a new car. I'm not seeing anything on this car at the moment that actually would give me that sort of hair standing in the back of my neck.
No, it's kind of solid, not spectacular, I think, isn't it?
Well, again, McLaren over the last couple of years have started poorly as such. So for this year, I'm sure they've learned that lesson. They want to start with a solid car that they understand, and maybe they have some big development programs in place. But I don't see that as being part of a development program, because that's for sure a new chassis and a whole new front suspension concept. So it's a compromise that they've made. Maybe they can make it work. We'll have to wait and see.
And Ian, if you just go around in front of us and have a look at the side pods on that car, we can see that those side pods are very different to the sort of radical side pods, Gary, that McLaren unveiled 12 months ago. Lots of questions coming in on Twitter, which I'm looking at right now, from people saying, please explain to us why there is the sudden change in philosophy for the side pods.
I'm sure there's a lot of people asking that, including a lot of people in McLaren's. I mean, the idea of the lowered inner part of the side pod was to get more airflow to the rear of the car, but it compromised the radiator inlet duct. And again, with that airflow that comes through between the front wheels and the chassis, the more you use for cooling the car, the less you have to make downforce. So basically you want the radiator inlet to be as small as possible and in the right position. Last year McLaren had to have that L-shaped radiator inlet, which was bigger than what they needed. This year's inlet's smaller, so there's more airflow there, mass airflow, to actually create downforce. So for me this is a better solution. I never thought last year's solution was a good one, and obviously from them changing back for this, for me, it indicates my thoughts.
Okay, I particularly enjoy the pictures and the drawing and the explanations. We can see a very large, slightly ugly lump coming out the side of the car there. Can you explain to us, again through the magic use of pen and paper, just what McLaren you think are trying to achieve by having their exhaust exit just there?
Well, the original last year's cars had what they called an exhaust blown diffuser. In other words, the exhaust tailpipe went along the top of the floor and blew just inside the rear tyre, and that stopped airflow from spilling underneath the rear tyre. If you looked at last year's, you had the rear tyre here, the exhaust out, the floor of the car is here somewhere, and obviously behind that is the diffuser. There's a lot of air. Whenever the air is hitting that rear tyre, it tries to disperse itself underneath the car. And by blowing the exhaust pipes into this area here, you stopped that. You took that airflow that's being dispersed by the tyre and stopped it from going underneath the car and making the diffuser not work very well. The FIA decided that wasn't the right thing to do, so they've now made an exhaust pipe location in a different position on the side pods. There's quite a big window, and I'm a bit surprised at what I'm seeing here on this one with the bulge and the exhaust pipe in a very basic position, but it is directed at the bottom of the rear wing, so that the mass flow coming out of the exhaust pipes has quite high energy, and by trying to get it onto the underneath surface of the rear wing, it will still give that little bit of downforce when the driver's on the throttle. So, I'm sure we'll see lots of variations in this, but interestingly, as I said, the panel here that carries the exhaust pipe, it's a sort of removable bit, so I think we might see a few changes in that before the first race in Melbourne.
Okay, and I've got live tweets coming in now, and Lewis Stone says, I'm assuming this is a contentious exhaust exit for McLaren. Lots of other people actually coming in and saying to me, is that going to be permitted? Is there an issue there with the exhaust? What effect will it have? Will the FIA be looking closely at what McLaren have come out with here? What will the other teams be making of this exhaust pipe? I mean, this is, I suppose if you took the car as a whole, the front and the back are the two areas that we'd focus on, and that exhaust particularly.
I see nothing contentious in it. The exhaust pipe area is quite wide, really, to be honest. 250 millimetres upwards to 500 you can have the exhaust pipe. 500 forward of the rear tyre to 1.2 metres, and car centre line outwards is also quite a big window. The last 100 millimetres of the tailpipe has to be within 10 degrees to 30 degrees facing upward, and 0 to 10 degrees facing inwards. And basically you can't cut it off at much bigger an angle than that. There's no problem with the exhaust pipe location. My only thing would be the bulge, the size of the bulge that's housing it. This Coke bottle area of the car between the inside of the rear tyre and the bodywork is really a very important part of the car. You know, in reality, that actually makes the front wing work better, because that airflow is sucking very hard right through this undercut section, right through to the front wing. So the whole car has got airflow through that section, and then there's this big bulge of bodywork right in the middle of it, restricting that flow. So I'm sure we'll see some developments before the season starts.
And from an engineer's and a designer's point of view, what's the dream? Where do you want that exhaust gas to be on a car like this?
You want to try to increase the mass flow through between the wheel and the bodywork, because downforce is created by airspeed. So if you can speed that airflow up, you will get more downforce out of it on the lower beam wing or the top wing. So basically, when the airflow comes out of there, there's a huge volume at very high energy, and you're trying to get that to go into the mass flow and just speed the whole thing up. This is sort of, for me, it's a little bit of nothing. I'm not quite sure that it will do very much for the car.
Okay, and finally, if we just move up alongside the rear wing. Last year, there was a lot of talk about the DRS, and we had big flaps, small flaps, medium-sized flaps, everybody trying to work out how best to get the DRS to work. And McLaren have said today, DRS is fine, but it's really useful in qualifying, less useful in the race. So, your thoughts on that? I mean, again, it's just an example, DRS rear wing for them, but clearly a very small one.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things, DRS, you can use at any time in qualifying, so it's worth probably 3 or 4 tenths of a second on a qualifying lap, which can be 3 or 4, 5 places on the grid. So it's really important to make it work well and reduce the drag of the car. Now, the smaller you have the rear flap, the shorter chord that is, when you open that up, the main plane of the wing has got so much shape into it that the airflow underneath that actually stalls as well.
Right.
So you get a big reduction in drag. If you have a big flap and a small main plane, it's only the flap stall that you will get.
Okay.
Because
the initial thought was the bigger the flap, the bigger the change when you open it, but actually that's wrong.
Absolutely right, because this will inflect the whole wing, whereas the big flap only just reduces the drag on itself. Right. Again, all this stuff is about drag reduction. These louvers on the side of the end plates, that just lets the pressure differential across the end plate equalise more, reducing the drag that comes off the back of the wing. If you look at the car running in the damp conditions, you see this big vortex coming off the rear wing tips. That's drag, if you want to try and reduce that. All of this packaging of the rear wing end plate to rear wing.
So these sort of little slits that we can see across the top of the rear wing, they're all there and they're all designed to the millimetre to get that rear wing working.
Basically you've got 3 sort of pressure areas. Outside of the end plate is an ambient pressure really. The top of the wing is a positive pressure and behind the wing is a negative pressure. And when they all join up at that back corner, it sets up this big vortex. And that vortex is being dragged along by the car. It's doing no good for anything. You want to try and reduce that as much as possible. So these here are to try and equalise that pressure, but still keep the wing performance.
Fascinating. Well, as we've said, it's a relatively pretty car.
Yeah.
The faster it goes, though, the better looking it is, eh?
Yeah, I mean, if it's ugly, it's got to be quick.
Yeah.
If it's nice, you can accept it.
Yeah. Okay, fine. And great to share that with you. And I look forward to sharing the pit lanes of the world with you. Bring on late March, and we'll head off around the world together.
Great to work together.
Excellent. Thanks for the drawings.
No problem.